The Battle of Ember Ridge. War wasn't something they were supposed to understand, but the world had a cruel way of speeding things up. Z stood on the crest of Ember Ridge, staring down at the valley below where the enemy forces gathered, their banners whipping in the wind. His breath came in shallow bursts, adrenaline pounding through his veins. Behind him, his friends, Izzy, Chase, Pence, Evan, Hunter, Nico, Christian, and Jack stood silently, each lost in their thoughts, weapons clutched tightly in their hands. "We ready for this?" Chase asked, his voice quiet but steady. His knuckles were white around the hilt of his sword, but his eyes showed no fear. Z nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure. "We don't have a choice. They come for our families. We stand or we fall." The group had grown up together, playing in the fields, training with wooden swords. But this was no game. The enemy marching toward them was a seasoned army, ruthless in their pursuit of power. Their village had been the next target, and with no adult soldiers left to defend it, it had fallen to them, the last line of defense. "Whatever happens," Z said, turning to his friends, "we fight together. No one runs, no one leaves anyone behind." Izzy, the quietest of the group, smirked. "As if we'd leave you, Z." Wyatt gave a shaky laugh, the tension breaking for a moment. "We faced worse, right?" Christian rolled his eyes. "You mean like that time we fought those wolves?" That was a picnic compared to this. The banter felt familiar, grounding them in a reality far less terrifying than the one waiting below. But when the sound of enemy drums echoed across the valley, the laughter faded. It was time. "Positions," Z ordered, his voice firm now. "We hold this ridge." The plan was simple. The enemy needed to cross Ember Ridge to reach the village, and the narrow pass gave the boys a fighting chance. With rocks and fallen trees as their only defenses, they set up makeshift barricades, bows at the ready, swords drawn. Eyes narrowed as he spotted the enemy approaching. The ground trembled as the enemy soldiers charged, their armor gleaming in the morning light. Z's heart raced, but his voice was steady. "Hold, hold, closer, closer still." "We've got this," he yelled, trying to rally the others as more soldiers pressed forward. But the enemy kept coming. They fought with everything they had, the noise of battle deafening, the clang of metal and shouts filling the air. Nico's arrows rained down from above, giving them brief moments of relief. But the enemy was relentless. For every soldier they brought down, more seemed to take their place. Jack, swinging his axe with brute strength, was panting heavily. "We can't hold them forever." Z's muscles screamed with exhaustion, but he refused to give up. "We don't need forever, just enough time." Then, through the chaos, a horn blared from the distance. Z's heart leaped. Reinforcements. The sound came from behind the enemy lines. The cavalry from the neighboring village, which had promised help, was charging in. The enemy, caught between the ridge and the sudden attack from behind, began to falter. Their ranks broke, confusion spreading as they realized they were surrounded. "This is our chance," Christian shouted, adrenaline fueling his voice. "Push them back." With renewed energy, the boys fought harder, driving the enemy down the ridge. Pence, grinning wildly, used his shield to bash through the front lines, while Evan and Izzy darted around, delivering swift, precise strikes. Chase, covered in dirt and sweat, tackled an enemy to the ground, disarming him in one swift move. Nico's arrows continued to fly, picking off stragglers as the boys forced the enemy back toward the valley. Jack, his axe swinging in wide arcs, roared as he took down the last of the soldiers near him. Finally, the enemy broke completely, retreating in panic as the cavalry tore through their ranks. The battlefield fell quiet except for the heavy breathing of the boys and the distant sound of the fleeing soldiers. Z lowered his sword, his chest heaving. Around him, his friends stood victorious, battered but alive. The ridge was littered with the fallen enemy, but not a single one of the boys had been lost. They had done it. They had held the line. Z looked at his friends, his brothers. Each of them had fought with a strength they hadn't known they possessed, and together they had defended their home. "We won," Izzy whispered, almost in disbelief. Hunter let out a triumphant whoop, and soon the others joined in, cheering and clapping each other on the back. Z smiled, exhaustion washing over him. "Yeah, we did." The Battle of Ember Ridge would go down in legend, not for the size of the army or the ferocity of the enemy, but for the bravery of a group of boys who stood against all odds. Together, they had fought. Together, they had won.